Bodog poll question asking you, how does the Bo Horvat story end? With the trade, re-signing, walks in free agency? You can vote at Sekeres Price on Twitter. Bodog, your source. Free casino games, poker strategies, and sports odds. And Bodog line of the day for me, Argentina and Croatia, and there will be penalties, right? It's the only way the Croats advance. It's the way the Argentinians advanced last time out. So I'm betting that draw and extra time and penalties at plus 295 on your Bodog line of the day. Jeff Paterson, one half of the Rink Boy duo with Andrew Wadden. They were busy Saturday digesting the most recent Vancouver Canucks loss, although a shutout loss at that. And, of course, our Canucks reporter. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm all right. Yeah, we had the knives out on Saturday night, but we weren't alone. Trust me. Yeah, that was not a lot of fun at Rogers Arena Saturday in the holiday season. It's supposed to be joyous. It's supposed to be festive. It was not, unless you were the Minnesota Wild and Philip Gustafson, I suppose. But, yeah, just add it to the pile of, unacceptable performances from this hockey club over the first 28 games this season.
I was talking to someone yesterday who was at the game and was part of some of the Boo Birds that came out, Jeff. And, boy, we've heard that a lot at Rogers Arena this year.
Well, Saturdays are supposed to be like the big night, right? Hockey night in Canada. The Canucks have played 4 Saturday home games this year. Buffalo, the home opener, we know how that went. There was the Nashville game where they jumped out to a 3-0 lead and lost 4-3 in a shootout. Then there was the other night against Minnesota where they got shut out. Their only home ice victory on a Saturday needed a power play in overtime to squeeze past Arizona a week ago. So, again, if people think that there's the big build-up to Saturdays, there certainly hasn't been much of a payoff for the paying customer going to Rogers Arena on Saturday night so far this season.
Was it fair to boo them? Not so much the style of that game, but I'm talking about the medium history now because they've played better. They've scored a ton of goals. Yes, it's a stinker on a Saturday night. They've got the right to boo. Is it fair to boo?
Yeah, I think it was because the build-up and the storyline coming into this was Minnesota had played the night before in Edmonton. They were coming with their backup goaltender. The shots were 8-1 for Minnesota 6 or 8 minutes into the hockey game, 14-4 in the first period. And this is a Canuck team that, they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. They had won 3 in a row. It felt like they had momentum. They keep talking about taking advantage of all these home games on the schedule now, and they just weren't very good. And then you had that 7-minute stretch in the second period with 3 consecutive Canuck power plays, and that should have been a turning point in the hockey game for the Canucks. It turned out to be the turning point with the shorthanded goal. But, yeah, the fans had nothing to cheer about, and then there were sort of those same old storylines of JT Miller giving the puck away, Nils Höglander making a weak play defensively that led to the third Minnesota goal. There just wasn't a whole lot there. So, again, for this team that keeps telling us that it feels it's turned a corner and got back to 500 and sort of reached this base camp from which it was going to start a true ascension, and then that. And it's sort of this unpredictable nature, I guess, of the hockey club that when you think that maybe they have figured some things out, then they come out and they do that. And we kept warning last week, like, hey, take the wins over Arizona and Montreal, even with all their warts, take those points, but beware that there are tougher opponents ahead. And the Minnesota Wild are sort of in that mid-pack. There are a lot better teams still on the schedule for the Canucks. But Minnesota came in here, played a nice road game, did what they had to do. And it wasn't like Kirill Kaprizov ran the show. In fact, the Canucks ended his 14-game point streak. It was some of their worker bees that just stepped up, got the job done. They cashed in on a power play, so that just continued the storyline of Canucks penalty killing, not getting the job done as well. So, yeah, overall, I think the paying customer had every right to let the Canucks know how they felt at the end of the night.
And I find myself looking around the Western Conference on the nights tonight going, okay, well, and only because we have those 4 dreadful teams at the bottom, right? Arizona, San Jose, Chicago, and Anaheim. We don't suspect that they will be any kind of a threat going forward. St. Louis is once again awful after getting their season back with a nice winning streak. And, Jeff, like everything broke against the Canucks on the Western Conference scoreboard last night, if you want to look at them vis-a-vis the playoff bar.
Right, and that was the significance of not picking up any points on Saturday. They played Wednesday, They play Saturday. They don't play again until Wednesday. And so if you don't get the points available to you, you are doing a lot of sitting and watching. And so they had a chance to move past Minnesota on Saturday with an outright win. Instead, Minnesota pulls 3 points forward. Calgary got a single point in Toronto, so they collected something at least there. And then yesterday, you're right, I think there were 5 teams in the Western Conference that all picked up points yesterday. Well, tonight's another night where there are a bunch of teams, including the Calgary Flames. They're wrapping up a road trip. That's the Canucks' next opponent, but they're in Montreal tonight, so that's a chance for Calgary to add points to its total. And then you get to the point where, Minnesota and Edmonton are playing tonight. Nashville and St. Louis, somebody's winning those games, and a pretty good chance that those become 3-point games. And I know we're still 2 weeks shy of Christmas, and we're talking about the significance of 3-point games, but when you're in a portion of your schedule where you're not playing, you need some results to go your way, and yesterday was not one of those days for the Vancouver Canucks. So, it's just going to get that much tougher. It'll be interesting to see. Ultimately, the 3-game win streak was nice, and it sort of gave you this false sense of where they were in relation to the playoff bar, but everybody else playing games, the Canucks aren't. Let's see where they stand in relation to that bar when they hit the ice at the Saddledome on Wednesday night.
Rick Dhaliwal reporting that Bo Horvat has rejected the latest offer from the Vancouver Canucks. And, it does lead you to believe that they've upped the offer significantly from any reported offer that was probably in the high fives at best to start this whole process. If he's still rejecting offers outright now, what does this say about where this story is headed? Is there salvaging and just getting a signature before the trade deadline for the Vancouver Canucks?
I think on one level, the fact that he's rejecting a deal means that they're talking, and wasn't it the Hall of Fame weekend where the story was they were all in the same city and nobody got together? And so at least there is some communication here. Am I shocked that the Horvat camp has rejected an offer? No, this is how negotiations work. And so the Canucks are going to have to regroup and figure out ultimately, how far they can push their offer, how serious they are about retaining this player who played his 600th game on Saturday night, all of them in Canuck colors. 15th player, by the way, to reach 600 games in a Vancouver Canuck uniform. So he's in pretty select company. We know a lot of his value to this group on the ice, but off the ice with the leadership as well. So this is posturing, this is negotiation, this is the way it works. I'm not surprised to hear that, and without knowing the number, but I'm not surprised that a volley at this stage in middle of December would be rebuffed by the Horvat camp. There's still time here. He's at 20 goals, and so he's got a ton of leverage. We know that. But ultimately, I thought it was really interesting, too, that in the third period on Saturday, for the first time in Bruce Boudreau's tenure, he reunited the Lotto Line. He got Miller away from Bo Horvat. JT Miller, and guys, you've heard me talk about Bo Horvat. I mean, I like an awful lot about Bo, but I think it's also fair to point out that he's not a playmaking center. I think most people realize that. Now, JT Miller's the latest guy to figure that out. Miller's got 7 games without a goal, has 1 in his last 11, and he and Bo have been arm in arm during that time. And so Bruce got JT Miller off that line, put him with the Lotto Line. I thought they generated some chances. Obviously didn't score there. But this is where you have to be careful if you're the Vancouver Canucks. Are you paying for this guy that got on an absolute tear in goal scoring, wins you a ton of faceoffs, but we know that penalty killing hasn't necessarily worked for Bo or the team? The shutdown role, he takes it on admirably, but there's still questions about how well he performs it. And so you kind of get lost in that 20 goals at the 28 game mark, but you have to be wary of the overpayment. And yet when you see what's going on around the NHL, and Roope Hintz was sort of the latest that was used as a comparable, well over $8 million a season. Yeah, I mean, anything, I think, forget the fives. The Ryan Nugent-Hopkins deal is so far gone when it comes to a comparable for Bo Horvat and the Canucks. Any hope that it was going to start with a 6, I think, is out of the question. And then it becomes, what is fair market value and how much of an overpayment is that for a player that can score you goals, could be a power play ace, but we know at 5-on-5 isn't a guy that drives a ton of play and certainly doesn't make those that he plays with an awful lot more productive. So I think all those questions have to be considered and answered. He's getting paid. We know that. It's just a question of by whom, and I suppose how does that transaction go down? Is there one stop? Is it, does he go in free agency? Is there a trade as a rental guy, as sort of a stopgap trade? And a stopgap stop for Horvat along his path to this big contract. So there's still a ton of balls in the air here, but just in terms of the Canucks not being able to, make a lot of headway with this foray, I'm not surprised. I think this is all just part of negotiations.
Let me ask you this question, because we continue to see it from Canucks fans and listeners. And I believe Patrick Alvin when he says we're not just going to let somebody walk in free agency. We were going to have to make a decision and a trade. But, Jeff, if they're very close to the playoff bar in and around the trade deadline, can you see any worlds where this management group, like last year, doubles down on the existing group and gives them their opportunity over the final 20 to see if they can make the postseason?
Did we not learn anything from last year?
That's my point.
Ultimately, last year, had they squeezed into the playoffs as the second wild card, they would have run headlong into the Colorado Avalanche. And yeah, it gets you a couple of home dates, but I don't know what that accomplishes in the grand scheme. And I can hear people saying, hey, upsets happen, and that's why you play the games, and that, sure. But that Canuck team did, with that defense core, 4 out of 7 against Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen. Come on, Cale Makar. Like, the Canucks were not going to pull off this incredible upset of the Colorado Avalanche. And so I think lessons have to be learned here, that for the good of this team and the long-term vision, you can't afford to have what happened in Calgary. The lesson right there of Johnny Hockey walking away. Now, the Flames were in a different boat last year, and, they had designs on taking a deep run in the playoffs, and it didn't happen for them ultimately. But, no, if the Canucks are floundering around the bar still, I think you just have to really take a long, hard look at the best interests of this club over the long haul, and that would be trading Bo Horvat and reaping. And not just Horvat. I hope at that case they would be looking at being players on the trade front ahead of the deadline. But no, there is just no conceivable way that they can let Bo Horvat hang around until the end of the season and then walk as a free agent. I
also wanted to follow up on what you mentioned there about Miller being the latest to find out that it's hard to score goals on Bo Horvat's wing. Now, look, Elias Paterson was sick yesterday at practice, so we have the lines in a bit of a jumble here. But including Miller playing at center ice between Dakota Joshua and Brock Besser. Are you seeing a return of Lotto Line here Wednesday? Do you think he's putting Paterson in the middle and Miller on the wing and Brock on the other wing Wednesday against Calgary?
Yeah, yesterday was I don't want to say a throwaway practice, but even Bruce afterwards sort of hinted that it was a little bit of an experimentation practice. Today is a full team day off. They've got their big Sports Celebrities Festival tonight, one of the great fundraisers that they do in the community. So it's team day off. They'll be back at practice tomorrow. I think we'll get a much better read on what Bruce is thinking. Hopefully Elias Paterson is healthy, but Bruce did say after practice yesterday that he wanted to see JT Miller back in the middle just in case they decide that they want to go that direction again here, which I'm sure has many in the fan base up in arms. Remember the storylines at the start of the season. He was on the ice for the first 9 goals, I think it was, against the Vancouver Canucks, and it just wasn't happening for him as a center, and they kind of had to get him out of the middle and onto the wing. Lotto Line looked all right in the third period. Like, they did generate some looks. Ultimately, they didn't finish there. But this is part of the problem, too. For a week ago, Brock Besser was that close to being a healthy scratch, and everybody thought, all right, hopefully that's just putting the fear into him that, he'll take the opportunity. He kind of got the get-out-of-jail-free card and got to play that night, scored. Well, he has 1 assist in 3 games since, so it's not like the threat of a healthy scratch for Brock Besser has brought out the best in him. And it's just, right now, it's just this jumble. It's this jumble of guys that we keep talking about, this mix that just isn't quite right. And so if Bruce was to go with Lotto Line, I'd be prepared to give it a little bit of a look there. But then what does that mean for Bo Horvat? And is he going to be playing with Nils Höglander and Dakota Joshua or Connor Garland? And the fact that Dakota Joshua is getting promoted, that tells you that Bruce obviously likes what he sees from the player, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. He's been a nice addition, but I'm not sure that Dakota Joshua necessarily needs to be a top 6 guy at this point, or does Kuzmenko get promoted? Again, there's lots of moving parts to all of this, but I think yesterday, and the reason I say yesterday was a bit of an experimentation practice, was I was really interested in the defense pairings as well. And they had Travis Dermott. Travis Dermott and Kyle Burrows have basically been together as the extra pair for a couple of weeks here now. And Dermott's been out of the non-contact jersey, and it looks like he's getting close, and he participates fully in all these practices. And then yesterday, they had Dermott and Bear, OEL and Burrows, and Stillman and Myers. You could make the argument that that was the fourth pair. Like, could Tyler Myers be coming right out of the lineup on Wednesday night in Calgary? Seems hard to believe, but we've seen some tough love for forwards. We haven't seen it applied to the defensemen yet. And so that's why I say hard to read a ton into a Sunday practice when they have a day off afterwards, but I think you can read a fair bit into what happens on the practice sites on Tuesday. So it'll be curious to see how that all shakes down.
It was also a bit of a punishment practice as well with the back skate. But
people were making it be. But I was out at UBC on Friday, and they did the same thing. They, at the end of practice, they went stops and starts between the blue lines. They had two sets of groups lined up on the opposing blue lines and back and forth for about 10 minutes at the end of practice. And then yesterday, it was side to side at Rogers Arena. Look, we're at the portion of the program where we're seeing a ton of message sending. I mean, we've seen, Rutherford, obviously, with his comments to Boudreau. Mm-hmm. But, guys, when Bruce Boudreau comes out after the game and says, I didn't pull the goalie because I didn't think we were going to score.
Wow.
Like, that is a remarkable admission. And he may not be wrong, but at the same time, like, what do you have to lose? 2 weeks ago, Carolina was down 3-0 in Winnipeg. They pulled the goalie with 5 to go, and they scored 3 times and tied. Like, it can happen. I'm not saying it was going to happen. And based on what I saw with my own eyes the other night, I kind of side with Bruce and his thinking. But at the same time, his job is to give this team its best chance to win. And so that was clearly message sending as well. We saw JT Miller parked in overtime in San Jose. Nils Höglander didn't see the ice after the third Minnesota goal because he made a pretty weak defensive play, I thought, there. So it just nightly now, and whether it's practices, whether it's games, it just feels like it's daily message sending around this organization. But ultimately, the messages don't seem to be being received all that readily because ultimately the results of Saturday night, that's what you judge this hockey club on.
3-0, 4-0 doesn't matter. How much do you think, and Canuck fans are conditioned to expect the worst and get nothing easy and all that, how much would it change if today at the end of the Board of Governors meeting, Gary Bettman says unequivocally, salary cap's going up by $4 million next year, maybe 5. Do you think that greases the skids for the Canucks to, hey, you might say it might grease the skids for them to sign Bo Horvat and feel empowered to up the ante and offer him more money? It might make other teams way more, amenable to taking on a Tyler Myers contract, to taking on a Brock Besser contract. Would that be a Christmas gift for the Vancouver Canucks if that gets decided today?
Yeah, I think so. For a couple of reasons. One is they've talked to this new management group about creating a cap cushion, and they really haven't done anything about it. So, yeah, it would be the league sort of putting a little salary cap room in their stocking, I suppose. And then, as you point out, yes, like you just hope it lubricates the wheel of trades around the National Hockey League and starts to make teams recognize. Now, of course, if the cap goes up, it's not for the remainder of this year. It would be for next year and beyond, but it does make perhaps taking on a Brock Besser a little bit more palatable if everybody's got a little more wriggle room there. Maybe the Canucks are willing to, prepared to retain a little bit of salary as well, as part of this newfound cap space that everybody's going to have. So, yeah, I would think that absolutely the Canucks and a lot of teams. I mean, that's one of the reasons we're just not seeing a lot of trade activity is half the league is up against it. And so unless you're able to construct these dollar in, dollar out deals, really you're taking half of the league out of play when it comes to, being a legitimate trade partner.
Mm-hmm. The Vancouver Canucks, as it stands right now, committed nearly $70 million for next year on what stands to be an $83.5 million cap, but could go to 87.5, 87.5, somewhere in there, if Gary Bettman and the league announce that hockey-related revenues have supported that kind of an increase. Jeff, marvelous stuff. You'll join us again tomorrow. We'll look forward to the game in Calgary. Flames v. Montreal tonight, so an all-Canadian battle there once again for the Flames after Saturday in Toronto before we renew this old Smythe Division rivalry. Thanks for this.
All right, guys. Thank you.